Ladies and gentlemen, it gives me great pleasure to welcome you all to the session Telecom for Tomorrow, Connecting India by 2030. We're delighted to have with us the Honorable Minister for Communications, Minister for Development of Northeastern Region. Thank you, sir, for your presence here today. At PAFI, we firmly believe successful policy formulation hinges on robust collaboration between government and the private sector. Your commitment to this principle is something we deeply appreciate and share. Looking back, I recall our first interaction in 2002 when I was leading CII's IT initiatives, and you had just embarked on your journey as a member of parliament. You had invited CII to gather a group of IT CEOs in Gwalior for a day of brainstorming and how to elevate Madhya Pradesh into the national IT stage. I recollect the way you conducted a session using flip charts and even making the Chief Minister of Madhya Pradesh put pen to paper. Fast forward to 2024, and one of the early actions as a communication minister was to initiate a comprehensive stakeholder engagement process. You established 6 advisory councils that include both government and industry leaders. I am honored to be in one of these groups. Your approach to these meetings has been refreshingly inclusive. From the start, you made it clear there are no big brothers in the room. You made it clear that we are going to work all as partners in a collaborative way. Through a very democratic process, we identified 6 or 7 key priorities and agreed to address 2 at a time. Interestingly, the group was a diverse mix of Indian companies, global companies, small and medium companies. And you made the point that industry should learn to work together. I must confess the initial weeks of working together was challenging. We've since adapted, developed a common minimum program which reflects our shared goals. Thank you for championing the cause of private sector government collaboration in policy making. At PAFI, we look forward to continued interactions with you in the months ahead. With these words, it's my pleasure to hand over the proceedings to my friend Suku. My only claim to fame is that I had the pleasure of playing gully cricket with Suku during my growing years in Chennai. He obviously grew more than I did. Thanks.
Thanks, Harish. And Mr. Sindhya, always a pleasure chatting with you. We are fortunate to have an opportunity to speak to the telecom minister on a day when everyone wants to speak to telecom ministers all over the world, right? Exploding devices have focused attention yet again very sharply on the importance of local manufacturing and on the security threats that are ever present in just shipping stuff in. So in that context, I'd like to ask the minister to start off by giving us a perspective of where we are on the local manufacturing journey.
So thanks, Sukhu. Also, Harish and Ajay, it's wonderful to be back at PAFI. I remember many, many years ago being at this forum. It's a wonderful forum where all of you, like we do in one of our strategic advisory groups within the Ministry of Telecom, sort of come together, brainstorm, try and identify paths of development and new paradigms going forward. So it's a privilege to be here, and thank you very much for inviting me back. Having said that, the segue that Sukhu has given in terms of looking at where India is headed in terms of indigenous manufacturing in the telecom sector. Just to give you a little bit of a vignette in terms of where we are today. 10 years ago, we had about 90 crore subscribers in India on mobile telecom. Today, we have close to 117 crore subscribers. On broadband, we had 6 crores. Today, that number has grown to 94 crores. So that's the kind of multiple and the fillip that you've seen occur in this sector. On the flip side of it, if you look at the cost structure, voice calls were roughly about 50 paise a minute a decade ago. Today, they are at roughly about 3 paise a minute. So there's been a 96% decline in costs on voice. Similarly, with regard to data, 1 GB of data used to cost close to about 289 rupees a decade ago. Today, that costs close to about 12 rupees. So there's a 94% decline in terms of cost of data. So that inverse relationship has played out, which is why you've seen a proliferation of that. Having said that, I think it is important for us within government and within India to look at India as not only being an enabler of services, i.e. this box that we all carry in our hands, but also to be a manufacturer of telecom equipment. 10 years ago, roughly, we would manufacture about 1,500 crores worth of mobiles in this country. Today, we manufacture close to 1,29,000 crores worth of mobiles in this country. So that's 30 crore mobile phone productions today. So we've become the second largest producer of mobile phones in the world. That's the quantum jump, the quantum leap that India has experienced. So as far as mobile phones are concerned, that's the delta. In terms of mobile and telecom equipment, whereas we were in many ways followers of the world in 3G and 4G, we marched with the world on 5G, and I believe that we will lead the world in 6G. Why do I say that with a fair degree of conviction? Because today, for the first time in our country, India has produced its own 4G telecom stack. We are only the 6th country in the world to possess that telecom technology. CDOT, along with Tejas Networks, along with BSNL, and along with TCS as the SI, system integrator, we are actually rolling out that network as we speak. The 4 cores have been set up across the country, north, south, east, west. They are functioning perfectly well. We're now rolling out the RANs, the radio access networks, and the BTS systems. By mid of next year, we should have rolled out close to about 1 lakh BTSs, which will completely, in many ways, democratize 4G from BSNL's point of view across the length and breadth of this country. We've had the fastest rollout of 5G in our country today. In 22 months, we've rolled out close to about 4.5 lakh BTSs. Now, these are figures which hitherto seemed alien to us and seemed alien to the rest of the world. No part of the world has ever been able to do that with the alacrity that India has. And that prowess, both in terms of India's technological capability, coupled with the government's push, coupled with government schemes like the PLI scheme. The PLI scheme in the telecom sector has resulted in the last 4 years alone an investment of close to 3,784 crores, production above 55,000 crores of telecom equipment, exports more than 11,500 crores, and the creation of 21,700 jobs across the length and breadth of our country. Now, that is huge transformation, ladies and gentlemen. And that's been possible because all of India has worked together with the whole of government approach that the Prime Minister has espoused throughout his 10-year tenure. And now, in the next 5 years, bigger goals, bigger emphasis, and bigger impact. That's the way that India is going to go.
You spoke of the 4G stack that India has indigenously developed, but India has also been working on a 5G stack.
So let me explain to you in very simple terms the way telecom technology works is that every even number in terms of evolution of telecom technology is a paradigm shift. Every odd number is a little bit of a tweak on the system. So when you went from 2G to 3G, that was a tweak on the system. But 3G to 4G is a paradigm shift because you've not only got a fatter pipe, but you've also got much lower latency. So 4G to 5G is a tweak of the system. But 4G to 6G or 5G to 6G is going to be a paradigm shift. So the towers that are being laid out right now, the RANs and the core will remain the same when, for example, a BSNL or Airtel will move from 4G to 5G. The only change will be you'll add an additional BTS on the tower and you'll move from 4G to 5G because it'll give you a bigger pipe and it'll move data with much lower latency, and you'll be able to access much heavier documents and data on your phone, like films and TV and all of that.
When you look at the telecom equipment space globally, there are these large multinationals that dominate this space. How can...
So India is going to be one of those now.
Oh, great. How can the...
That's the target, Sukru.
How can the Indian public sector and the private sector, because I know there are a lot of startups, for instance, in India, which are working on 5G technologies. How can the public sector and the private sector work together?
So let me give you an example of that. That's already happening. So CDOT came out with, and it's taken us, which has been a revolution across the world. And I didn't know this before I took over as telecom minister, that to be able to come out with a 4G core, completely indigenous, from scratch, right? Because this is all very centralized technology and IP that is not shared by the majors, Huawei or Ericsson or Nokia or Siemens or any one of those majors. But to come out with your own core stack, your core and your RAN, CDOT has come out with its core within 24 months. And working with the private sector, Tejas Networks, which is now a Tata company, working with Tejas Networks, that is today bringing out the RAN. So when BSNL's network gets built out, the 1 lakh towers that I was talking about, which include the 35,000, by the way, which we've already set up. So from beginning till today, in the last 100 days of government, we've put in place almost about 25 to 28,000 towers, by the way, in the last 100 days. That is a combination in many ways of a PPP, a public-private partnership model. So you've got a government CDOT, you've got a private sector Tejas, you've got an SI in the form of TCS, and then you've got a public sector TSP in terms of BSNL. And all working together with a motto that one of them told me, which I loved: one vision, one goal, one result, and one team. And that's the way the four of them are working together.
If you look at the growth of the Indian telecom space, and the most obvious metric to measure this is number of connections, right? Number of mobile connections. It really exploded in the decade between 2004 and 2014. And that was also, unfortunately, the decade when BSNL sort of took a back seat. There was much more vibrancy in the private sector. BSNL didn't do a lot of things that it should have done. We are beginning to see investments back in BSNL, and there seems to be a focus. What are your plans for BSNL going ahead?
So first of all, I'm the Minister of Telecom. I'm not the Minister of BSNL. Having said that, it's very important and imperative that BSNL succeed as being a player. So let me give you a little idea of the market. Generally, across the world, if you look at telecom markets, there are at maximum 2 players, or if at best 3 players in a market, never more than 2. India today has 4 players: Reliance, Jio, Airtel, Vodafone, and BSNL. Having said that, it is our imperative to make sure that the BSNL story is a success story. And what does BSNL need to do, according to me, as a fiduciary responsibility holder, as government owns that company, is I really believe that, first of all, my priority is to roll out this network. So my 1 lakh sites need to be up by the middle of June, because I need to be able to provide my 8% market share of customers maximum bandwidth capability. Not to say that everyone requires it, because there are a lot of customers that are still on 2G and 3G. But more and more we need to move to 4G, because 4G coverage is close to about 98% of the districts of India already. Close to about 6,11,000 villages have 4G coverage out of 6,44,000 villages in India to date. So my primary imperative is to make sure that I roll out my network. Once I roll out my network and I'm able to satisfy my customers, then my key is further customer attraction. So let me tell you, with the tariff hikes, there's been a lot of porting that's happened from other players to BSNL. So my key challenge is going to be that after the network is rolled out, to be able to ensure that customer acquisition that I've done over the last couple of months stays with me. So that's customer retention. And finally, also customer sat. And therefore, I'm building out a CRM model within BSNL, which will engage with customers on a real-time basis and make sure that their problems are resolved immediately. Very much akin to what I did in civil aviation with Air Seva. So very much of that same CRM app that we're going to roll out for BSNL as well. That being said, the other big imperative for BSNL today is to roll out the BharatNet initiative. That's a huge initiative where we're going to take the broadband pipe across all Gram Panchayats in our country. BharatNet 1 has connected close to about 1 lakh Gram Panchayats in our country. BharatNet 2 BharatNet 1 is about 1,20,000 Gram Panchayats. BharatNet 2 is about 96,000 Gram Panchayats. So out of a total of close to about 2.46 lakh Gram Panchayats in the country. So I still have about 40,000 Gram Panchayats left to connect in our country with OFC broadband fiber. As well as BharatNet 1 worked on a linear topology of connecting villages. And therefore, if the line got cut from one end, then all the villages downstream would get cut. And therefore, we're converting that linear topology into ring topology, and therefore giving a level of redundancy for that fiber as well. So we're going to spend 1,39,000 crores on that project, which includes laying out new fiber in 46,000 villages, conversion of ring to ring topology on the balance 1,20,000 villages, and the O&M contract. Because many a time what happens is you lay out the CapEx, but then you've got Ajay Khanna who's supposed to do operating and management, and he does a really shoddy job because he's not getting enough of the finances, and that's the end of your 2.5 lakh crore project. So we built close to about a 45,000 crore cushion into this scheme to manage the O&M at least for a 15-year period to ensure connectivity for citizens across our country. And that broadband pipe will come to every home, very much like the 1980s PCO model, if you guys remembered, where you had the STD call box that was run by private entrepreneurs. And therefore, we're going to have the Bharat Udyami, who will run the last mile connection from the ONT box in the Gram Panchayat down to every single village and have their own business model.
Okay. Not since my postgraduate program in math have I encountered the term ring topology outside of class, right? So thank you. India Post, which is another critical component of your ministry. And the world over, postal departments have, as time goes by and as technology advances, some of them have really become very good courier companies or delivery companies, right? And for e-commerce companies, this is a huge gap. In some other places, they have diversified into telecom and done all right. And still others have tried to get into banking in some limited way. I know that India Post had plans for all three areas. Can you tell us a little bit about this?
Okay, great. So you've actually hit my heart now, Sukumarji. This is a department that, according to me, is one of the finest departments in our country. And I'll tell you why. This was the department that I started and pretty much cut my teeth on in terms of my first stint as minister. I was MOS in this department way back in 2007. and I worked on Project Arrow, which was really a BPR exercise of India Post, along with the whole transformation on look and feel. And we did about 500 post offices in 3 months, and I would have a daily dashboard with a heat map where I would be monitoring 7 or 8 fields in terms of results across those 500 post offices in our country. It's one of the best departments, I really believe, and the best services, because no other department has that reach in India, private sector or public. I'm not talking about government alone. 165,000 POSs, points of sales, across the length and breadth of our country. Think about it. 6.5 lakh villages, 165,000 post offices, right? So you've got one post office per every 4 villages in this country. I believed, and I'm talking about way back in 2007, Sukumarji, that a post office should be the window to the world, to the common man. A post office should not only be a place where you send and receive mail, send and receive parcels, but it must become one-stop shop for everything for the common man in our country. And that's the idea with which we moved Project Arrow. Today, I'm very proud to see that the idea that I had seeded in 2009, prior to demitting office in this ministry, of starting up a post-payments bank, has reached fruition. 7 years ago, the Indian Post Payments Bank was started. We have today 9.8 crore customers, almost 10 crore customers. We have transmitted 45,000 crores into those 9.8 crore accounts through DBT. That's a huge step for India, a huge step for India Post. We believe in being a vehicle for financial inclusion for all public services. We've set up close to about 13,841 Aadhaar centers. We've got close to about 840 passport seva kendras, where we processed about 1.5 crore passports for our country. We've got dark niryat kendras, where people in villages through this box can access markets across the world and can export goods through their post office. So we've set up 340 dark niryat kendras and done a turnover of almost about 200-300 crores in the last 4 to 6 months. So we are going into paths that have not been charted before. And I believe that that digital technology will actually transform us from being a service provider to a service enabler. And my Dakia today, who can go with his mobile phone and his app, on his app can provide all government services to every citizen across his circle, can take on board PLI schemes, life insurance schemes, rural postal life insurance schemes, can book parcels, can do every task that is possible on your mobile phone. And we've created that Darpan app for the postal department as well, which will, and you can also do scan and pay on that app. So the postal department also is moving leaps and bounds. Today our turnover is close to about 12,000 crores per annum. I'm looking at possibly trying to increase that by 50 to 60% over the next 3 to 4 years by looking at new verticals, new business paradigms. And yes, your beginning line was absolutely right. We need to transform ourselves from just a mail business and a letter business very much, and I say this in all my dashboard meetings every Monday in the postal department, that we need to transform ourselves into a logistics company. So we've got to look at route optimization. We've got to look at multiple sources to be able to transport our services, whether it's through air, rail, road, boat, ship, across the board. And we've got to transfer ourselves and to convert ourselves into a logistics company. And that's what we're looking at India Post.
Okay, we are coming to the end of this conversation, and I want to get this question in, because apart from being the Minister for Communications, you're also the Minister for Development of the Northeastern region. And we all know that traditionally it's a region which is where connectivity has suffered, both physical connectivity as well as telecom connectivity, and as a result, there's always been a sense of alienation that populations there have had. What efforts are you taking to ensure that they are connected with and enter the economic mainstream of this country? Because the minute you do that, I think all the other problems will get solved.
So let me set the stage first. I think that the Northeastern region, as Prime Minister has said, is not the last pillar of our country, but is very much the first pillar of our country. The Prime Minister has a vision to convert the Northeast region, and I mean all 8 states, into the growth engine of the economy. And if that has to be done, very much on the lines of what Sukumarji just said, not only infrastructure, but digital inclusion is a very, very important part of that. Over the last 10 years, we've spent a budgetary outlay of close to about 81,000 crores on railways, close to about 48,000 crores on roads. We built the world's largest road bridge in the form of the Bhupen Hazarika Bridge, Bogeybill Bridge, which is the largest rail bridge. We are building a connection between West Bengal and Sikkim today on rail, from Swenko to a point in Sikkim, which is going to go through 14 mountains and 28 highest bridges in the world, which is being built out today. On civil aviation, we had 9 airports in the Northeast in 2014. 2 states were not connected by air. Can you imagine? 70 years after independence, still not connected by air. Arunachal Pradesh and Sikkim. Today, Arunachal Pradesh has 3 airports. Sikkim has 1 airport. We've gone from 9 to 17 airports in the Northeast. Through Udan, in my past tenure, we connected 71 new routes into the Northeast. I had also given out on international Udan 3 or 4 routes to Chittagong and 2 others, which are in the process of getting executed as we speak. So across the board, there's been connectivity. On telecom, we had 6,000 villages left in the Northeast that do not have mobile towers, a total of 25,000 villages in the country. Through the USOF fund, we have committed to build out in these 25,000 villages so that there is 100% saturation across the country, and the 6,000 villages in the Northeast, 100% saturation by the middle of next year. So there will be not a village left in India without telecom connectivity. And that telecom connectivity brings with it digital inclusion. Because if you're connected on telecom and you have 4G, you have the big fat pipe, you have low latency, you can then connect the artisans directly to the global market. You can connect the horticulturists directly to the global market. So today my pineapples are going from the Northeast to Dubai and to Germany. My jackfruit and my lemons and my king chilies are going all across the world. Partly through Krishi Udan as well. So that connectivity brings with it markets. And information access today capital is fungible. Capital has become a commodity. Good ideas is what is required. And if you have a good idea and a good practice, the world is your oyster. And the Northeast is our oyster.
That is a good note to end on. I promised we would end at 3:50. It's now 3:55. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sukumarji. Thank you.
So I'm going to take this opportunity to say that somebody who's young, somebody who's done 22 years plus of public service, somebody who's done, I was calculating, 9 different ministries: telecom, donor, civil aviation, power, communication, IT, commerce and industry, corporate, and post. Amazing story. And somebody who sits with you, not a piece of paper, and the kind of data he can give you, I was like getting lost myself. So very corporate, more than a corporate, dashboard, things like that. One of the few ministers I've interacted over the last 2 decades, and I counted, he replies to your WhatsApp in 60 seconds. So that's the speed of your response. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in thanking the minister.
By the way, Ajay, on that, on a funny note, when I first became minister in 2007, and I've always had this habit because in my past life, I was an investment banker. When you're on that job, you need to respond on the second. So I would do that, just as I would as a parliamentarian or as a banker when I was a minister. So one of my family friends who's close to my father, politician, one day said to me, because I responded to him with that alacrity, he said, "What are you doing?" So I said, I thought I'd made a mistake. So I said, "Why?" He said, "Why are you responding so quickly?" So I said, is there something wrong with that? He said, no, take your time. You must take at least 4 or 5 hours. Otherwise, they'll think you have all the time in the world that you're responding so quickly.
Thank you so much. Please join me in giving a big hand to the minister. We'll have a coffee break. We'll reassemble at 4:25. Thank you so much.